Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we are going to cover off a bunch of deck lists that you can take to the Pioneer Explorer Metagame Challenge this weekend on MTG Arena. Now, one thing on the official newsletter for Arena, I think it's a typo. They said best of one was the format, but all the metagame challenges have historically always been best of three. So I would assume with this video that we are going to be looking at best of three as such, and it was just a typo. If it turns out last minute to be best of one, I will circle back and do another video. So just think of it as bonus content in the end. So we're going to look at Untapped to see what decks are doing the best on the Arena ladder since the release of Pioneer Masters into the format. And then there's one other deck I'll cover and go from there. There's not a huge amount of data, just given that the set's only been about a week. It is at times a little bit rare intensive. As well as Mythic. There's like 400 plus cards in the set. Not all of them are constructed playable, but we'll kind of see where things go from there. So we're going to jump into it. We're going to look from Untapped. We'll look at the best deck lists, and I'll paste them in the video description. You can copy paste. Everything will be timestamped. One quick thing that we've been mentioning throughout the holiday season, in the top left-hand corner, you'll see a charity goal for the month of December. I'm donating every penny I make off YouTube to help local Toronto-based food banks. Helping those in need. So if you want to help out, just watch some of my content, like, comment, all things that help out, and then we'll be doing a nice, hopefully sizable. We're getting close to the goal. We're almost at $500. Goal is $800. Last year we did $350. So we've already surpassed last year's total in terms of donations, which I'm really hyped for. So let's jump into it. Fortunately, we don't have a huge metagame distribution. A lot of folks are playing Demons, Rakdos Demons, and then 5-colored Niv. I will preface by saying people will always ask, I'll show the stats at the end, but Izzet Phoenix has not been doing well the last few weeks. It's been sub 50% for some time now. So when people are asking inevitably, what about Phoenix? That's the case. People will likely still win with Phoenix because it's a deck that's got a high kind of variance in terms of player skill that kind of execute it. But overall, aggregate average is not doing that well. So we are going to look Diamond and Mythic rank, 5,200 games played since the release of the new set. Highest win rate deck is Azorius Spirits. So we got some tempo updates to the deck, which is pretty sweet. This deck's a fun deck to play if you like kind of flash-oriented decks. Scaling back a little bit on the 1-drops. You have now some 4-drops in Enduring Curiosity, Card Advantage, Engine that can flash in, Wandering Emperor, another kind of threat that gets around targeted removal, can be removal spell on its own. Your 3-drops, Skyclave Apparition, and Brazen Borer, which can be some tempo elements as well. You have more counters that are just broader counters. We used to have, the deck used to play a lot of, if you have a flyer, it costs 4. This one's just always going to be kind of mana leak upside with Exile. Rattle Chains protects your stuff, Shacklegeist to tap down stuff, Supreme Phantom as your Lord, Sheltered by Ghost as removal and lifelink, and then you have your Mausoleum Wanderer as protection spell, along with Mockingbird that can become a copy of any of your other creatures. You have Slip Out the Back as protection, Spell Pierce, so just a bunch of cheap disruption to kind of play around with everything. Mutavault as a creature land in the mana base. I wonder if you can play the Virgin here. So that's one thing I would kind of consider. You don't have a large amounts of basics, but I think in general it would just be better because the Verge, I believe, starts on blue and then adds white if you have a island or mountain. So it's basically just a pathway with upside. So that's something you might want to look. I feel like Arena is going to have a lot of Lotus Field gamers. Just they love those types of decks. So cards like Dampening Spear, Deafening Silence, those types of effects can be very useful to slow them down. Also, incidentally, if you run into a Nykthos player, shuts them off. Portable Hole, cheap removal, Disdainful Stroke for big mana decks, Get Lost, flexible removal, Rest in Peace for graveyard hate. Split Up can be a useful sweeper, kind of one-sided Plague Wind style effect. Koskia is welcome, and Wedding Announcement could come in against the Grindfest. So things like Rakdos Demons, anything that's like heavy removal deck, just provides you some card advantage. Or just multiple bodies that make it hard for them to deal when they're just playing a bunch of fatal pushes. Speaking of Rakdos Demons, the next highest deck, 73%. So Rakdos lives on, Fable the Mirror Breaker deck. So you have the Unholy Annex being the demon component along with Blade of Oni, as well as Mutavault, all ways to kind of meet the condition for the first side of Unholy Annex. Shelly's in here, Unstoppable Slasher, just sticky removal, like harder to kill spell. They need to exile it, but can deal huge chunks of damage. Trades up a lot of times in combat. Your Harvester Fable package, whole bunch of removal, bunch of hand hate, 6 pieces of targeted discard as well in the deck. So we're seeing like the verges in this deck. Hand hate, cheap removal, grind value, Hidetsuku, good against any of the low to the ground aggro decks, Cat Oven, stuff like that. Path to Peril is a sweeper, Leyline of Void is graveyard hate, and then Invoke Despair as over the top. This is another deck that you could potentially play like Deafening Silence, or Dampening Spear, for example. Rakdos Aggro. So mainly red aggro with some black cards. So this deck here is recently added in Screaming Nemesis as kind of a way that you can target it with some effects like Reckless Rage to shut off opponent's life gain. This version's on Infuriate, so a little bit more pump. You have the mouse package like we see in Standard, as well as Fling. So Monstrous Rage, Infuriate, less targeted burn, just using creature density in the deck itself. This is another deck where I think I would probably, it's a little iffy because with the Rakdos Verge, it plays black first, not red first, where more times than not, you're going to want this as a red land to start off. Jengantha is banned since this came out, so remove Jengantha, you have another sideboard slot instead. So that's one thing that would just need to be updated. The bannings took place like between this data set. So if we see Jengantha in lists, just I'll replace it with like another sideboard card that can be useful in these types of matchups. So we'll kind of go from there as we kind of proceed. The easiest thing that I see with this is just having some sort of graveyard hate could be useful in terms of the deck itself. Then we go to Selesnya Taxes. So this one here is a Collected Company deck that's using a bunch of elves to accelerate early with a whole bunch of tax effects. Grand Abolisher kind of makes it so your opponent can only play on their turn. Thalia's tax non-creature spells. Tax, like you name a card, gets taxed. Lands come into play tapped. They can only play 1 per turn. Really good against Lotus. Counterspell. Eldrazi Displacer can blink some of your ETB effects. Enduring Innocence draws you cards. Skyclave exiles as removal. Where Fox Bodyguard can be more removal, can also go over top your creatures, so you can protect them from removal or like sweepers, and you get left behind a body. Wandering Emperor for the heavy removal matchups, just more removal with Bodyguard, not Body Fox. Artifact Enchantment, life gain at a native autumn, just more tax effects, more removal, graveyard hate. Jamoka's Command as kind of a fight effect. Cathar Commando is artifact enchantment hate, and then Portable Hole is cheap removal. Then go to Izzet Lotus Field. So this deck here is built around the card Lotus Field. Taps for 3 mana, but you gotta sack 2 lands. So with Lotus Field, Thespian Stage can become a copy of Lotus Field, and then it's got a whole bunch of effects that tap and untap. So you have things like Hidden Strings that can let you untap lands, Four of the Pages, Vizier of Tumbling Sands. So you kind of just generate a whole bunch of mana. With Artist Talent leveled up to level 2, it does let you get cheaper in terms of your spells. So you generate more mana each untap, and then it also lets you draw a discard. You eventually find Lier, which lets you kind of just keep drawing and discarding from your deck. And then you wish into your sideboard for your win condition, which generally is Thassa's Oracle once you draw out your whole deck. You can also go Niv as a way to just kind of ping your opponent to death, depending on what they're doing. Expedition map was in Foundation, so that will help you find your Lotus Fields. Cheap removal, Galvanic just kind of plays around counters in a way where you can copy the spell, so you get 2 copies. Also just generates a whole bunch of value if you like double copy Pour Over the Pages. You'll have to go into full control mode, so keep that in mind. Narset's Reversal against like discard effects. There's the 6 mana Thought Distortion, so you can do that on them. Anger for sweepers, Filter Out is a kind of bounce effect. If they're playing like a lot of enchantment or permanent based stuff. Dispute is cheap counter. Another Lier, you could also wish for Lier if needed, in case you mill over your Lier or they get rid of it. And then Niv is another win condition if they eat away at your graveyard. Don't know what that was. So then we have Boros Burn. So this one here is another kind of take on the red-based aggro decks. So Bolt Wave in here, Hired Claws, a cheap burn enabler, so it could turn on Spectacle just from attacking, put counters on it, reasonable 1-drop, Kumanos, Swift Spears, Play with Fire. You have Boros Charms in here, Eidolon as a way to ping your opponent, Lightning Helix in here, and then Screaming Nemesis full set here that you can target with any of the burns, shut off the life gain, skewer the critics. You have Deflecting Palm to kind of redirect large chunks of damage, Destroy Evil for big stuff or enchantments, Graveyard Hate, Searing Blood for creature decks, Skullcrack for anti-life gain, Trick Proctor for ETB, Twisted Fealty to steal big things. Kind of like Vortex in these decks as well, kind of over Skullcrack. Skullcrack, you really have to hold it for that situational moment. Vortex is consistent damage every turn. You do have to hold up 1 mana, but it's easier if they have multiple reoccurring sources of life gain. Azorius Control. So Control Andes, 63% on this one. Looking kind of win conditions, Wandering Emperor, you have Narset to kind of grind, Teferi in here, some creature lands, Fountain Port style effects, bunch, cheap removal. Usually if you have Fountain Port in these decks, Portable Hole, you don't play Temporary Lockdown. So that's kind of a tell that you'll see sometimes. This one's a Kahira Companion, so no 80 card Yorion special. Bunch cheap counters, removal, kind of control the game that way there. You'll sometimes see Sunfall out of these decks. It's not unusual in that case, just the exile can be better at times than the Supreme Verdict, but if you're seeing a lot of cheap tempo style decks, Supreme Verdict gets around counterspell and is a mana cheaper. Cheap removal, we have kind of counters, Narset Reversal like we mentioned, Graveyard Hate, cheap counters, more Narset for card draw decks, Phoenix, stuff like that. Beza for the aggressive decks, Farewell, just catch all, and then Shark Typhoon for kind of the control mirror. Jund Sacrifice. So this is a combo deck. It's Rakdos base. Yurga and 2 cats basically create an infinite loop where the cats sack themselves to each other, keep coming back into play. You infinitely drain out your opponent's life. You have the Fable, plus just kind of filter your draws. Mayhem Devil pings your opponent to death. Scavenger's Talent is an all-in-one kind of effect. It creates food tokens for you. It mills you into the combo, and then it can reanimate stuff later on. Again, Giganta is no longer legal. I would just play another Obnixis probably, which is what I will update it to. Chandra's Defeat in here, Ghost Vacuum. So red base decks, Graveyard Hate, Artifact Enchantment Hate, Hand Hate for like mid-range control decks, cheap removal, like just a bunch of removal options that are flexible. Paw Patch hits a bunch of different things, very useful tool. More Graveyard Hate with Hearse. Kolaghan's Command, just flexible, destroy some artifacts, hits over the top type thing. And then Obnixis is good into kind of the control-ish, heavy removal-based decks. 5-color Enigmatic. So Zur finds his way into Pioneer. So in Standard, we have like Zur Overlords. We see a similar concept here. Zur can animate any of your Overlords, so you can cast them for their impending cost, and then animate with Zur, and then get the attack trigger the same way. You also have Enigmatic Incarnation, which can be used to sacrifice enchantments to kind of go up in terms of the curve. So what you can do is say, turn 3, cast Overlord of the Hauntwoods, get the land. Turn 4, Enigmatic it, and then you can go into a 6-drop, which is like Lidvala or Overlord of the Boiler Bridges. And then with Leyline Binding, you could go into Atraxa or Overlord of the Mistmoors. Yorion Companion for kind of value blink. Thoughtseize for Hand Hate, Graveyard Hate, Tax Effect with Archon, Knockout Blow for aggressive decks, Elish Norn for ETBs. Heavy spell decks, Rurik Thar. Just imagine Lotus trying to catch a bunch of spells, taking 6 damage per turn. Thought Distortion as well for just kind of stealing all their cards. This is the Narset Reversal target that you really want to hit. So we have Creativity. So this is a Jeskai version. There's Jund versions as well that are going around. The Jund version plays Titan of Industry as a 3rd target. This one's Jeskai with like Wandering Emperor, Fable. Basically the target is Dominal Creativity. 1 or 2, you hit like a Atraxa or a Valgavoth and kind of beat down that way there. Otherwise, it's a Jeskai control deck that's got some token enablers. Hullbreaker against decks where like some of these decks you're just going to win with these, but like if there's heavy sweepers, stuff like that, this just gives you more threats. Narset for heavy card draw. Cheap counters, Graveyard Hate, High Noon's a really sweet card against any deck that's looking to kind of storm off Lotus, stuff like that, playing multiple spells per turn. And then late game, it could just be 5 damage to any target. Cheap removal and Get Lost, and Fire Impulse, and Veto for kind of the counter mirrors. Niv to Lights. So not the highest win rate, but people love this type of deck, built around Bring to Light. So this lets you search for a card that is an artifact creature, creature instant sorcery with mana value equal to or less than the colors that paid for it. Main target will be Niv Mizzet Reborn typically. That gets you a whole bunch of cards, but you kind of have toolboxy effects where you can find like a sweeper if you need. The big thing is getting Valky, and then you can cast Tybalt Side for free. So you get a 7-mana Planeswalker out of it that's tutorable, but just a lot of kind of multicolor spells. Beans draws you a whole bunch of cards. Grindy midrange looks to kill everything. You have like Unmoored Ego that can just name Lotus Field, perhaps, or something like that. So a lot of ways to kind of play around that. Leyline Binding, just cheap removal. So Fatal Push for cheap removal, Veto for counter wars, Deafening Clarion and a sweeper. Cabal is really good against like Storm style decks. Calling Ritual, just really good against the low to the ground decks. Just a big sweeper, generate you a bunch of mana. Stack decks, you have Yasharn, Casualty of Wars lets you go over the top, blow up a bunch of things. Thought Distortion for like control-y style decks. Like I said, Izzet Phoenix, 43%. Not doing too hot. I'm not gonna go into depth here. If you want to play it, the lists have been pretty stock for like months now. You can find any of the lists. Just go on my Aether Hub, type Izzet Phoenix, and you can see whichever works best for you there. And then last one. So Dimir Ninjas prior to Pioneer Masters dataset was the highest win rate deck. It's still putting up results on MTGO. So Kaido's found a home in Pioneer. There's more ninjas in the sets, but it kind of plays similar to the Dimir tempo. You still have stuff like Spyglass Siren, Blood Pit's Drowner, Mockingbird can copy your stuff, Brazen Borer, but you have Moon Circuit Hacker, who's a ninja, that gets you some card advantage, that you have the ninjutsu stuff. Ornithopter as a cheap evasive body that you can ninja in the Kaido. Fairy Miscreant as a way to potentially draw some cards. Satura draws you cards whenever cards come into play that weren't cast kind of effect. It's also a ninja. Cheap removal, Thoughtseize is in here. Mutavault's also a ninja for Kaido, which is sweet. Anoint, cheap removal with cut down. Spell Pierces, Disruption, Dreams of Steel and Oil. Hand Hate for like creature decks, artifacts, stuff like that. Enduring Curiosity for more grindy matchups. Stingful Stroke for big mana, and Leyline of the Void for graveyard hate. For the week, let me know if you get any 7 wins, what decks you did, and we'll try to do some coverage on the event as well. I'll probably do 1 or 2 rounds with it. Good luck, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.